Welcome to Liberty Voice USA, the home of unfiltered political truth, where we move past the noise, past the spin, and look straight into the stories shaping America's conscience. Here, every headline is more than just words. It's a reflection of what power wants you to believe and what truth refuses to hide. Tonight, we turn to a moment that's been echoing through both the halls of Congress and the corridors of political debate. A confrontation that left one of America's most seasoned legal minds speechless. Jasmine Crockett versus Alan Dershowitz. Two names from very different sides of America's ideological battlefield, colliding in a single, unforgettable exchange. It began, like many of these moments do, with confidence. Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor turned media commentator, was on familiar ground. Known for his sharp intellect, his decades in constitutional law, and his willingness to defend the most controversial figures in American politics. He's argued before the Supreme Court. He's advised presidents. And in recent years, he's become a familiar voice defending Donald Trump's legal battles and calling out what he sees as double standards in the justice system. His words carry weight, and his presence in any discussion can shift its tone instantly. But Jasmine Crockett is not easily swayed by authority, especially not when that authority has built a reputation on bending legal reasoning to fit political narratives. The Texas Congresswoman, known for her fierce intelligence and unapologetic defense of truth, has become one of the most recognizable new voices in Washington. She doesn't shout to be heard. She speaks with the kind of clarity that cuts through rhetoric like a scalpel through silk. And that clarity was exactly what silenced one of America's most talkative legal figures. The exchange came during a discussion about political accountability, about whether justice in America is still blind or if it's been blinded by power. Dershowitz was defending what he described as the constitutional right of a president to make decisions that may appear self-serving but fall within executive authority. He framed his argument, as he often does, in the language of law, careful, technical, but detached from the moral weight of its consequences. He argued that the actions of Donald Trump in seeking to overturn election results were not in themselves illegal unless specific intent could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But Crockett wasn't having it. She listened, quietly, respectfully, and then leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. She asked one question, just one. "Professor," she said, "if intent matters so much, why is it that the intent of those who fought to protect democracy on January 6th isn't considered as noble as the intent of those who tried to destroy it?" The silence that followed said everything.
Dershowitz tried to respond. His words stumbled over themselves, caught between legal theory and moral clarity. He started to talk about precedent, how the law separates emotion from judgment, but the power of her question had already done its work. Because this wasn't just about law, it was about truth, about the moral consistency that our political system so often pretends to have, yet constantly fails to uphold. In that one moment, Jasmine Crockett exposed what many Americans have been feeling for years, that too often legal arguments become shields for political convenience, that the same principles invoked to defend the powerful are rarely extended to protect the powerless. And what made the moment even more powerful was what came next. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't turn the exchange into a spectacle. She simply sat back and let silence reveal the imbalance. Because sometimes the most devastating truth isn't shouted, it's spoken once and left to echo. It was the kind of moment that reminds us why political commentary is more than just debate. It's the struggle between intellectual honesty and intellectual manipulation. between those who twist law to serve politics and those who use politics to defend justice. Dershowitz, for all his brilliance, represents a generation of thinkers who believe the law can be separate from moral consequence. Crockett represents a new generation that refuses that separation. A generation that understands that the Constitution is not a shield for the powerful, but a promise to the people.
It's easy in today's America to mistake verbosity for wisdom, to think that those who speak longest must be right. But Crockett's moment reminded us that sometimes the most powerful voice in the room is the one that asks the simplest question. Because truth doesn't always need complexity. It just needs courage. That courage is what's been missing from much of Washington. Too often, we hear speeches wrapped in caution, designed to offend no one and challenge nothing. But when Crockett speaks, there's no mistaking her intent. She's not performing for cameras or chasing applause. She's fighting for accountability. She's speaking to a country that's tired of watching truth get buried under layers of legal jargon and political theater. And that's what made this exchange so symbolic. It wasn't just about Crockett versus Dershowitz. It was about the deeper divide in American politics, the battle between those who see justice as a weapon and those who see it as a duty. In defending Trump, Dershowitz argued that political motivations shouldn't criminalize presidential decisions. But what Crockett asked was something far more profound. If we allow leaders to act without moral restraint, then what meaning does the Constitution really have? It's the same question echoing through every major political scandal of our time, from corruption investigations to congressional hearings. We keep hearing about intent, about legal thresholds, about due process. And while those principles matter, they too often become smokescreens for something simpler: the refusal of power to hold itself accountable. Crockett's question didn't just challenge Dershowitz, it challenged every viewer to ask themselves what justice really means in America today. Is it a technical standard, or is it a moral compass? Because if it's only the former, then it can be twisted endlessly to protect those who can afford to twist it. For years, Alan Dershowitz has stood as a symbol of the legal establishment, the belief that intellect and precedent can justify almost anything if argued well enough. But Jasmine Crockett reminded us that truth isn't something to be argued into existence. It's something you stand on, even when the world tells you to sit down. And that's what gives her question its enduring power. It wasn't just a challenge to one man's reasoning. It was a challenge to a system that all too often forgets that laws were made to serve people, not power. Moments like this remind us why voices like Crockett's matter, not because she's loud, but because she's clear. Not because she's radical, but because she's real. Her exchange with Dershowitz wasn't about scoring points. It was about reclaiming a basic truth that our democracy depends on, that justice without morality is just another form of control. As the segment ended, Dershowitz offered a final defense, trying to contextualize his position, saying he believes in protecting the rule of law from political vengeance. And Crockett nodded, acknowledging the point, but then she added quietly, "Protecting the rule of law also means protecting it from hypocrisy." And that was it. The conversation ended not with shouting, but with understanding, or at least the beginning of it. Because the real lesson of that moment wasn't about who won the argument. It was about what it revealed, that truth doesn't need to dominate to be victorious. Sometimes it just needs to be heard. In a media landscape built on noise, moments like this are rare. They cut through the fog. They remind us that amid all the arguments, the talking points, and the endless cable debates, there are still people willing to ask the hard questions, the kind that pierce the armor of power and expose what's beneath.